Hey everybody! Today we are going to be talking about Erikson. There is a time limit on this video of 15 minutes, otherwise it won't publish to YouTube. And guess who didn't know that and recorded a 40-minute lecture before this? Me. So we're learning together, and now you get a much shorter and more efficient video. I might actually have to break it into two, but all right, so let's get going. Yes, you've been learning about the different theorists that clinicians use to conceptualize development and growth and change across the lifespan. And so you've learned about Piaget, you've learned about Vygotsky, you're learning about Erikson and Bandura this week, and next week you'll learn about Bronfenbrenner. Your text probably touches on a couple others, but I wanted to take you a little bit deeper into Erikson and just share a little bit about how I think of Erikson. Erikson's work is very influential to the field of psychology. I do think that many clinicians today still rely on his stages of development in thinking about, when did people experience maybe early traumas or non-normative age-graded events, developmental influences, and what stage were they at, where might it have impacted their growth and development, and then how might it have impacted further stages. But before we get going into Erikson, I just wanted to talk a little bit about attachment, because Erikson's theory is a theory of psychosocial development. And anytime we're talking about social development, the underlying assumption there is that attachment is a powerful force in growth and development. And so we got to back up just a little bit and talk about attachment. So let's do that. Right. Anytime we talk about attachment, we're talking about a tie or a bond that binds two people together and serves a biopsychosocial function across the lifespan. In other words, attaching as an infant to a caregiver protects a person biologically. It provides them with biological benefits for their growth and development. It also helps regulate them and expand their cognitive processes, helps regulate their emotional processes. And then socially, it serves a function too. It provides frameworks for relationships, schema for relationships, and also sets us in a social context. So attachment is a really powerful force that is at work from prenatal development all the way to death. And so in children, attachment can look like a desire for closeness to a caregiver. My question to you is, like, what are the cues that a child is looking to engage with their caregiver? The first is going to be eye contact, maybe making some sounds, maybe turning towards, maybe reaching for, and socially attuned, an aware and attuned caregiver is going to notice those very subtle communications, nonverbal communications, and possibly provide a response. A caregiver who is maybe a little bit preoccupied or busy may not pick up on those very subtle hints for attachment, and as a result, a child might escalate their attachment-seeking behaviors to really reaching out, to pulling on clothing, to touching, to making more noise, to maybe moving closer to. And if the caregiver is not attuned to those behaviors, what begins to happen is a child begins to feel a little bit anxious. Some of the internal dialogue might be, my caregiver's not noticing me. I really want to attach. I'm looking for their attention, and why are they not giving it to me? What's happening? I'm feeling uncomfortable here. And as a result of not being responded to promptly or accurately, the child would then escalate their attachment seeking behaviors even further, which might look like crying, pulling, tugging, kind of following or chasing, um, maybe uh, maybe yelling, maybe doing things in the environment to get attention. And if the caregiver can tune in and respond and help soothe, that child's going to be able to calm down, regulate themselves, and engage in their environment. If the caregiver is not able to respond in a sensitive manner at that point, the child would further escalate their behavior because the internal anxiety is growing. And so then we might see things like tantrums, extreme distress, maybe even like a numbing or a checking out. And depending on the caregiver's sensitivity and ability to respond to these attachment related behaviors, the quality of the relationship is going to take on a particular tone. And that attachment style is going to be the basis from which growth and development occurs across the lifespan. And that's kind of the underlying assumptions of Erikson's theory. So I'll give you a little bit of history. Harry Harlow was a researcher in the 50s or 60s, 50s, 60s, who studied baby rhesus monkeys and attachment behaviors in baby rhesus monkeys. You might have heard of him if you took Psych 100. So Harlow wanted to see if babies attached to maternal figures based on the provision of sustenance, based on the provision of food, or if baby monkeys attached to their caregivers based on contact comfort. And so what he did was he set up this experiment where, if you look at your screen, he put these baby rhesus monkeys in a cage for like 22 hours a day, with two monkey caregivers. One caregiver had the ability to feed, but was made of wire and had less prominent and stimulating facial features. The second monkey caregiver had prominent features and was covered in a soft terry cloth that was offered comfort, but was not wired to be able to provide food. And back in the 50s and 60s, we believed that it was the provision of sustenance that is what facilitated an attachment relationship. And as a result of that being our belief, other ideas followed. Ideas like moms are the primary caretakers for children. Men are incapable of forming deep, meaningful bonds and attachments with their offspring. Offspring will bond significantly to people who feed them. And so, that's why Harry Harlow did his study. He wanted to see if that was true. And so, he ran his study, and what he found was that the monkeys overwhelmingly spend an overwhelming amount of time on this soft terry cloth caregiver monkey with the prominent features that was not able to feed them. And in fact, when the monkeys were scared, the monkeys ran directly to the monkey parent that was able to offer comfort, not food. And so as a result of Harlow's study, we got some really powerful information that food is not the primary facilitator of the attachment bond, but instead it is the ability to offer contact comfort, because that comfort is what helps beings calm themselves down, regulate internally, and reach a state where they're then able to go out into the world and explore, because that is what facilitates growth and development, both biopsychosocially, the ability to explore our world with an open mind. And that can only happen when our internal state is regulated. Okay. I need to see where we're at. Okay, we got 5 more minutes. And then I'm going to stop and make a part 2. So now you have a little bit of background on attachment, and how attachment underlies our ability to navigate what Erikson calls his psychosocial stages. Okay. So let's see here. So Erikson was a humanist who posited this theory of psychosocial development, and he presented his theory as a series of stages where each age correlates to a stage that involves some kind of issue. Sometimes it's referred to as like a crisis, but it doesn't mean like, oh my God, crisis. It more means just a conflict that a person is trying to work through and resolve for themselves. And so this issue is a psychological challenge in managing our interaction with the social world. And so he posits each stage like this versus that. For example, his first stage is trust versus mistrust. And he includes that versus part because he wants to really denote the dynamic tension between these two opposing tendencies. And it's not that we either develop trust or we're totally mistrustful, but instead, each of Erikson's stages can be thought about like a continuum. And there's a continuum of trust versus mistrust. And we can be on the extremities of that continuum. Most of us are probably somewhere kind of in the middle, being more trusting or more untrusting, but capable of trust or capable of mistrust. Okay. Erikson says that successfully resolving the tension in each stage is what's going to give us the strength to help us move through the next stage. So in other words, how you navigate through one stage of development is going to have a great impact on how you navigate the development of the next stage. And if we don't resolve the tension of each issue, what ends up happening, according to Erikson, are kind of like a buildup of lifelong issues or social difficulties, emotional difficulties. So, for example, if we navigate that first stage of trust versus mistrust with a greater sense of mistrust of the world, if our inner sense, and we'll go deeper into this, but if our inner sense is that the world is not a safe place, our needs won't be met, that's going to color the way in which we interact with people, establishments. That is going to color our behavior. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and that's going to be part 1. And now I'll start on part 2 and go take you through the specific stages.